Greetings, everyone. I'm here on this 17th day of February, 2026. I'm here with my new friend, Accounted4, whom I met, I think, yesterday on Twitter. We had interacted on a thread by Darwin to Jesus. And let's see, I'm blanking out. I can't remember what it was. What was it? Oh, it was on, he gave some arguments for the existence of God or the universe.
Yeah, that
Why
the universe had
can't
to
be-
have a beginning.
Yeah, or have basically a creator. All right, and so I will probably screen share that here in a minute, but let's see. Can you hold on just a sec here? Yeah, let me go ahead and share our thing here. All right. So before I get with these exchanges that I have, I usually like to get a little bit of background from the people I'm talking with. Is there any information that you might find interesting for people? And I kind of like to get an idea of where people are religiously, maybe how they're raised or anything like that. And then I'll tell you about myself, if that would be okay.
Okay. Yeah, I was raised Christian. I went to a Christian school, but then I kind of slowly ceased being. It was a gradual process where I started learning science. I first started believing evolution was true, but God orchestrated it, and then kind of gradually I realized I had kind of moved God out of being necessary. And so eventually I kind of just naturally lost the belief.
Okay, great. Any other information you might find interesting? I'll tell you about myself.
Not really.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. Okay, I'm an old man. I'm almost 60. I've been a Christian about 40 years. And I was raised in a Christian environment, somewhat with my mother anyway. And didn't understand what the gospel. I didn't really understand until I was about 20 years old. And then from then on, 1986 is when I finally understood. So I'm 59. I'll be 60 this year. I'm a dental lab technician. I live in Kansas City. I like philosophy. I like to think about things. I like to test ideas, and I love talking to people with different ideas in mind. I feel like that's how we get sharpened. I think that one of the antidotes to all the craziness in our society today, at least in America, is I think dialogue. What we've done is we've othered other people who have different ideas than us, and we say you shouldn't even talk to those people. So I'm very much opposed to that, and very much a proponent of speaking to people with different views, and hopefully learning can be done on both sides, and growth can occur. I'm a dental technician. I'm in my lab right now, self-employed. Got 6 kids. Sadly, I'm divorced. And I'm of the Reformed Baptist persuasion of Protestantism. Anyway, so that's about me. All right, so let me go ahead and see if I can figure out how to screen share this. Want that one. Need that one. Takes me a second here to do this. I'm still not really good at screen sharing here. Okay, can you see it okay?
Yep.
Okay, so this is the thread that Darwin to Jesus put up. And he basically has 4 things why the universe cannot be eternal. And so your first rebuttal was firstly the first law of thermodynamics literally states that energy can be neither created nor destroyed, only altered in form. Secondly, we're referring to age since the Big Bang, and thirdly, that problem remains with an eternal creator, and then fourthly, contingency is eternal. And I retorted saying, that's the most uninformed and silly post I've read all day, my friend. Let's have a conversation to discuss. Can you do it? And so eventually we go back and forth, and you agreed to do it. So thank you for that. All right, so I said we'll go through these one at a time. We'll take each one at a time. So why don't we go ahead and do well? Oh, so would you consider yourself an agnostic atheist, or how would you classify yourself?
I call myself an agnostic atheist, but it changes depending on how you define God. I think if you define God as the necessary being, I'd be very Gnostic atheist. But if you see him as just like an interdimensional but beyond us power, I'd say I'm more agnostic to that.
Okay. All right. And you had several descriptors on your account that I thought were very interesting. Maybe we can get to that later on. I thought that'd be interesting fodder to discuss as well. But okay, so let's go ahead and start out here. Firstly, you said so his contention is that basically the universe itself cannot be eternal. And the first thing you talked about, second law of thermodynamics, but then you brought up the first law of thermodynamics, saying that energy can be neither created nor destroyed, only altered in form. So how does that refute what Darwin de Jesus purported?
It's because he's using the laws of thermodynamics to argue that, well, given infinite time, infinite entropy should have occurred, so there should be no low entropy state. And my rebuttal was to, of course, cite the first one, which says, well, you can't create energy, which means there isn't a beginning to the energy, at least if we're following the basic laws of thermodynamics.
Okay, but you said that it can be altered in form, right?
Yeah, it can be altered in form, which is entropy.
Okay, so would you agree that everything in the universe is changing?
Yeah.
Okay, so everything in the universe is an effect, right?
Huh?
Everything in the universe is an effect in a causal relationship, right?
I'd say, again, materially yes-ish, because it does get complicated when you talk metaphysical elements. But if you're talking about just like what we observe in terms of physics, yes, it is in effect.
Okay, so the entire universe is an effect without a cause. Is that what you're saying?
No, well, I should specify, I believe that there exist necessary things, but I don't think they are metaphysical. I do think they are abstractions, but I don't think they actually exist as their own thing or as God.
Okay, so you believe in such a thing as necessary being then, being that cannot not be?
Not really necessary being as much as necessary properties.
Okay, are these
Properties that
necessary
all things
properties?
must have, or that even, just existence has to have.
Okay, so what is the nature of these properties? Are they dependent or independent?
These properties are independent.
Okay,
They
and
are
how do you ground them? I mean, what is
they
their
are
being?
logically necessary, which means I would define that as it is logically coherent to say they are possible, but it is logically incoherent or contradictory to say that they would lack in any case. So
Wait
an
a minute, I'm
example would
sorry.
be like truth. You can't say there is no truth because that itself would be a truth. You'd run into a contradiction trying to deny it.
So from your perspective, the laws of logic are necessary, logically necessary corollaries to existence.
Yes.
Okay, and our logical laws, products, are they rational?
How do you define rational?
What is their nature? I mean, it's like would you agree that
I
rocks are
If
not
you want me to describe
rational?
what I think they are, I think they are just the consequences of identity. When you define what a thing is, you are assigning logic, and similarly, applying logic is to assign an identity. So if you
But
say it exists, you're inherently saying there is some logical pattern it follows, versus it doesn't exist, therefore it also follows certain patterns like not interacting with things.
okay, so um, you said that I just forgot what I was going to say there. You'll concede that there is such a thing as logically necessary things, and they are not necessarily marked by reason. Then I guess, or I, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Um,
The only correction I'd add, which is a minor one, is logically necessary property. So a property all existent things have,
okay,
or
so
that would
and
be
then you
inherent
said, oh,
to.
that's what I was thinking. So you say that
Yeah.
some things are just exist because we somehow label them that, or
No. So when I said identity, I'm referring to like the metaphysical definition of the thing, the not how we define it as people, but how it actually is. I'm saying to give it form, you have to apply logic, and logic is the form of it. And I believe there is a form or logic that is what we call existence, and that all existent things have it. But I do think that it can't exist on its own. You can't have just existence but devoid of any existences. I think an existent thing is kind of required for
Right.
existence.
But all existence is dependent in nature.
No, back then you said the universe, which is more like I said, it's more material. It's not the abstractions, it's the particulars.
Okay. And that's one of the things you describe yourself as a moderate realist.
Yes, so that would be my statement is I would believe that the ideal or metaphysical or whatever you want to call it is the more abstractions, the things that can't exist on their own, but you see categories of particulars that possess them. In the same way, all existences have the trait of existing, but I do not think existing can be done without existing a particular way.
Right. And so would you say then that everything that we see here is an instantiation of a perfect of it in somewhere in some supertemporal realm?
No, because that's more platonic. I'd say everything is made up of two components, two kinds of properties. One is the abstract necessary kind of properties that it shares in common with at least one other existence, and the other are the unique making properties, the particulars, the
Okay.
things that define it as separate from other things.
Okay. But you do believe that there are universals that inform the particulars. That's what realism is.
Yes, I believe there is an ultimate universal in the form of, like, the definition of existence itself that all things must possess.
Okay.
But then it can
So,
have additional other properties that align with it added on top. But it still has to be in alignment with the existent property to exist.
um, okay. But the thing, are you familiar with Aristotle's fourfold causality?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. Because you're kind of using some terms, you're using terms that wouldn't make sense in his world or in Plato's world. Um, Aristotle explained causality by using the example of a sculptor making a sculpture. Okay, and he basically said that let's say he's making a granite sculpture for something. He says that the rock of granite is called what he called the material cause. It is a thing out of which something is made. All right, and then he had what is called the final cause, which would be the reason for which it was made. You say, oh, the king commissioned him to do that, or something like that.
Okay,
And then you have what's called the formal cause, which would be the blueprint. It would be like either has in his mind or written down. What am I going to make? I'm going to make a bowl, and it's going to have these particular properties, whatever. And you got that thing. That's the thing that moves it toward the end. The information that moves it toward the end of whatever you're going to have. And then you have the efficient cause, which is the sculptor himself. He's the one that brings about the sculpture, and in a subset of the instrumental cause, of the efficient cause is the instrumental cause. That is the instruments that he uses, and like the hammer and chisel to bring about the final cause of that. Now, logical laws don't have any content. They don't have any material content. They're just instruments to be used by logical propositions. And realism is going to state that if you have something instantiating here, there must be something, according to the principle of proportionate causality, that has that property in and of itself, or the capacity for that property in itself. Now, we as teleological beings, we are volitional creatures. We are intentional creatures. We're intending to have this conversation right now. How do you account for intentionality instantiating in the universe?
so I can kind of get into a big part of that, which I guess I'd say is you have the necessary element of existence itself, and that's what all existences are kind of, I guess you could say, instantiating
Yep.
as
You can't have, but you can't have existence existing independently. The word itself means
and that's
ex
my point is
existere.
it's an instantiation where existence can't exist without an existence existing, but you can't have an existence, like you said, without existence itself, which is why I always say it's a property, not a thing. they are mutually dependent on each other.
Okay, so what is the nature of the big E existence you have?
I think it's hard to define any of the itselves because they can only really be described as one component, which is themselves. The best way you can get around it is kind of just saying, well, it's like this or it's like that. And I'd say existence I perceive it as truth. It is, mutually exclusive to falsehood or it not being the case. And I don't really think one can get closer than that because that would require you to add components onto a fundamental simplistic concept.
Yeah, but you've got to give some kind of accounting for ontological existence. You can't have contingent existence because basically you said all existence is contingent that we know.
All particular existences are contingent. Yeah, which I guess is all.
So would you say the universal existence, if you will, it would be more like aseity or self-existence. It is not contingent, right?
Well,
I'm not talking about logically.
It's an abstraction,
I agree with you logically.
So
I'm sorry?
It's necessary for existences, but it doesn't exist apart from contingent ones. It is
so it's
a
dependent,
component, you could say.
Necessary being is contingent upon contingent being?
What?
You just said that necessary being is contingent upon contingent being.
No, I said it requires contingent being. So I'd say in the sense that a part of the necessary is to possess something contingent.
So the necessary is both contingent and necessary at the same time in the same relationship?
No, there's a difference between, again, you said contingency itself versus the contingent. Part of necessity is contingency itself, but it doesn't have necessarily a contingent. It's complicated. Contingency
well, it's got to make sense because you're violating the law of identity here.
Huh?
It's got to make sense. You're violating the law of identity here.
No, because you're perceiving it as me saying it's necessary and it's contingent, but I'm not saying that. I'm saying the contingent itself is necessary, but of course,
that's irrational. That's complete nonsense.
Oh, let me ask you this: do you think contingency itself, the possession of contingent properties, is itself contingent?
No, it can't be by definition.
Yeah, correct. It can't be.
It would be dependent independently.
Well, the thing is, you can't have contingency itself being dependent because then...
That's what it means. That's what the word means.
It means to be dependent, but to be dependent itself can't be dependent on something else.
How can it not?
Because let me
it's
put it
independent this way. Dependently.
Part of contingency is that a thing can be at least two mutually exclusive ways. There's two possibilities for it, correct?
No, being and non-being.
Yeah, like being and non-being. Those are two
non-being is nothing,
contingent states.
Non-being is nothing. And it's not the word nothing. It's literally the lack of existence.
But it's still a contingent state, correct?
Its nature is contingent. It's more than that.
But not existing is a contingent state something can exist in. Something could be either existent or non-existent and both be possible and that be contingent.
No, pure nothingness is inconceivable.
It's not pure nothingness
because you've got the idea of nothingness. If something exists now, something exists necessarily. That's a necessary corollary.
So, do you believe everything is necessary and the contingent doesn't exist then?
No, I believe that there are two types of being in the universe. There's necessary being
and contingent.
That's right. And contingent being is not necessary. It could either be or not be. Necessary being cannot not be by the nature.
Said it. Contingent being can or cannot be, as in there are two contingent states at least for every contingent existence.
No.
Being and not being.
No, non-being though is not a state. It's the absence of a state. That's where you're making a mistake. You're acting like there's two choices. No, there's either being or not being, and not being is not a choice.
But it being is a possibility, and it not being is also possible, correct?
Yes.
But so that's what I was saying in the original thing. There are two possibilities. That is what contingency is. It's the possession of at least two possibilities.
Yes, but if you're speaking in a positive fashion of something that does not be, you're talking about nothing.
Yeah, but my point is that
like if I did not exist, It's not Trey who doesn't exist. It's like, no, it's just, there's nothing said, nothing, period.
But then it is true you don't exist. Again, this is outside the point I was making.
No, because you have the concept of actually being able to attribute my potentiality of being.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea itself is something. I'm saying pure nothingness.
Yeah, the idea, the possibility itself is a thing. I'd agree to that, which is kind of what I'm getting around to.
I'm sorry, could you say that again? I didn't hear it.
Yes, the possibility exists even if the thing doesn't, and that itself, the possibility, is necessary.
And so the possibility must be somewhere in somebody's mind, right?
I wouldn't say a mind, no.
Well, where is it?
I would say it is simply that which is consistent with the definition of existence itself. It's logic. Again, like I said,
it's really hard to get around God, isn't it?
No, I wouldn't say that. Like I said, I didn't even get to make my point about contingency, which is, I guess, the fourth point I made. My point was contingency means the possession of at least two possible ways of being. I'll avoid the state word. Two possible ways of being. But if you say...
But it's not. Being is. It's either being or non-being. Being is not non-being.
Being or not being. Two possible ways of being. Either do...
No! You just contradicted yourself.
What word do you want me to use here for possible what? What is the commonality between being and not being that is a word you will accept me to say both are possible?
If you want to talk ontologically, to say something could or could not be, that you're speaking about the nature of its being. I do not have to exist. But when if nobody ever had an idea of me and I never had any instantiation whatsoever, it's not like Trey does not exist. No, there's no Trey. It doesn't exist. It's nothing.
Yeah. It's kind of getting around the point because we keep talking about the word. I'm just saying contingency means there's at least two possibilities. I'll just end it there. Okay. Not states, not whatever, just two possibilities at least. You cannot have contingency where there's only one possibility. Correct?
Yes, I'll grant you that, yeah.
Yeah. So for contingency to be itself contingent in terms of it, you need at least two possible states of contingency itself. Not contingent things, contingency itself, because that is what we are talking about. What are the two possible states of contingency itself? How would you identify them?
Yes, I'll grant you that. Being and non-being.
Yeah. All right, so contingency itself could be or it could not be. But wait a second. Those two possibilities, as we agreed, contingency is the multiplicity of possibility. So if there's two possible ways contingency itself can be, to be or not to be, then what happens if we go down the not be path? All right, then contingency contingently is not existent. Or in other words, there are two possibilities. Either there are one possibility or two possibilities. And you run into a contradiction. You end up saying contingency contingently failed to exist. But you couldn't contingently fail to exist.
Yeah, but you're missing you're missing the point that you're saying that contingent. You have an idea of something in your mind that failed to exist. That's a possibility. The possibility is already up here, but
here I'm talking about. You could say the possibility. Contingency is possibility where there are a multitude of possibilities. Irrespective of my mind or my thought, there's a multitude of possibilities. Either the possibilities exist fundamentally, or they have to be themselves a sub-possibility. But you can't infinitely have infinite sub-possibilities to make it itself a possibility.
Okay, you need to give me the nature of this store that you're shopping at, this possibility store. What is the nature of that?
The nature of it? What do you mean? What aspect of the nature?
Well, you're saying like you get this large group of contingent beings. All right, they have to have some kind of being in order to be. They have to have some kind of conception to be a possibility, right?
They need definition, yeah,
right.
And I define possibility as.
And tell me what that is, other than in the mind of God.
I would say it is simply to be coherent with the definition of existence. To contradict it, again, because remember, I view identity as a set of truths that are a collection. And obviously, any identity has to be wholly consistent and it can't be internally contradictory. For
Okay,
a identity to be possible, it has to be consistent or non-contradictory with the definition of existence itself.
so existence itself is the rock from which everything is hewn, is what you're saying.
Yes, it is truth itself. And so when you start constructing truth constructs, identities, you inherently need it to be consistent with it. Anything that's not possible is inconsistent with truth itself. And
Okay.
thus, I would argue, inherently has an internal contradiction, because an internal aspect of all identities is truth.
I'm sorry, what was that? Why is it inherently contradictory?
Because all identities inherently contain truth, and existence itself is truth. Therefore, anything that violates truth or contradicts it is violating itself. That's why I'd argue anything that is impossible is self-contradictory.
Anything that is impossible is self-contradictory. So everything is possible?
Anything that is not self-contradictory is possible. So if you can give a logical structure and avoid all contradiction, that is a possibility. It could be true or false, but it is at least possible.
But falsehood is a contradiction?
If there's a contradiction, then it is void of truth. So you could say, yeah, it is false. Again, it's all about possibility. You have that which must be true, that which must be false, and that which could be true or false. The possible can be either always true, like the necessary, or true or false, both of being possible, like contingent.
Okay, I'm not following you on that. Can you give me an idea of ontological justification for contingent existence?
But it depends on what I'm allowed to use for it. Because I could simply say my prior argument that contingency can't itself be contingent, but contingency exists and is therefore possible. Therefore, it must be necessary.
Well, yeah, it's called hypothetical necessity. I'm talking about ontological
But
necessity.
this
It's
isn't
not
hypothetical
ontological,
necessity. This is modal necessity. This is
which is
actual necessity.
yeah, it's called nominal necessity. It's
It
the
can't
difference
be
between,
contingent. It can't be impossible. So it must be necessary. It literally cannot be, by definition, contingent or impossible.
because it exists right now, is what you're saying.
We can observe that it exists, and therefore know it
Right.
is possible.
All right. So, but you cannot have contingent being instantiating without violating the law of non-contradiction. Do you agree with that?
Can you
In other
repeat
words, if
that?
there's a time when you were not, you would need to predate yourself in order to create yourself, right?
To create myself, I would have to predate myself, which would be a contradiction, yes.
Right. So if there's something contingent now, there must be something that is necessary to give
Yes.
it being. So you agree with
Yes.
that? Okay.
Yeah.
And so I label that necessary being God. And what is your problem with that?
My problem with that, I mean, there's a few. My main problem with that would probably be, like I said, I believe contingency itself is necessary. So in the same way that
Yeah, but you're just
contingency
equivocating terms
requires
there.
necessity necessarily implies contingency. Like you said, it implies possibility.
No. Contingency, yeah, you're saying because contingency exists, there must be necessary being. But it's not necessary for there to be contingent being. In other words, God could
Contingent being,
exist
because
and nothing
with a
exists
prior
besides
delineation
him.
of being versus not being, then yeah, I would agree. It doesn't have to be, but it has to be possible to be necessarily.
No, possible being is an imperfection, not a perfection.
Now, I'm saying it is
Being is a
necessarily.
perfection.
I'm saying it is necessarily true that all the possible contingent states are indeed possible. It would be logically incoherent and self-contradictory to say that contingent being was impossible, or to say that any particular contingent being that is
Is
impossible.
it possible for is there a logical problem with there being necessary being and no contingent being?
Yes, I would say so.
Why?
I mean, Again, you could simply go off my prior thing of observation. You see contingency, so it
No,
obviously
I'm not
can't be
talking about
impossible. I know.
existential. We're not talking existential. I'm talking about logically, forget about we're existing right now.
Logically speaking, it goes back to, I guess you could say, the concept of the whole truth, where you could say truth exists, but if there's no actual truths that are instantiated, you have no instantiation. It's not a thing.
Yes,
You
but
are making
you're defining the truth as something that is less than perfect.
Huh?
The individual truths that are made of like act and potency, they're complex. They cannot exist other than without perfection. They are dependent. They are lacking in their perfection for something. Therefore, they're not necessary.
And you seem to be confused because I'm saying there is a symmetry here that contingency necessitates necessity, and necessity necessitates contingency.
If contingency being exists, which is you and I, we both agree with that.
Yep.
Then it's necessary that there's necessary being. But if we did not exist, necessary being does not depend upon contingency by definition.
Well, I disagree with that because, like you said, your logic is contingency exists, contingency requires necessity, therefore necessity exists. My logic is contingency exists, therefore it's possible. Contingency cannot be contingent, therefore it must be necessary. Contingency itself.
Yes, but it's not the same being because you're violating the law of identity.
No, because it's contingency itself. It's separate. Because that's the thing is, you would basically what this would be saying is there are always contingent aspects to reality, whether or not it is being or not being.
Aspects to reality.
What?
There doesn't have to be contingent aspects to reality.
Again, I think you're viewing this as being, because I'm saying there's always a multiplicity of possibilities, contingent states, or whatever you want to call it, possibilities, contingent possibilities. Reality can
in a contingent world, which we live in, but I'm saying take that away.
Not in a contingent world. I'm saying this is necessarily true. There is necessarily always a multiplicity of possibilities for reality.
In a contingent world, but not necessarily. Not in God.
Yes,
God is simple.
Because, like I said, that contingency cannot itself be contingent. It becomes an infinite regress issue. Because if contingency is contingent, well, then now you need to explain the contingency of the contingent aspect of contingency. And that was my point.
It was conceived and created by necessary being.
And
so you want to say from his perspective,
but a necessary being can only conceive and create it if it was possible to do that in the first place. But possibility itself is either necessary or contingent. And so either it was necessary or it is contingent, in which case you're just saying we can explain the existence of contingency by presupposing contingency. Which
I already explained. It's nomically necessary, but it's not the same being as necessary being. Sure, because God, conceives of something and it comes to be. It is necessarily true that contingent being is the way that it is, but it's not ontologically necessary. There's two types of being. You can't confuse those two types of beings and say they're the same thing.
Yeah, I'd agree. There are two types of being. They're not the same, but they're both contingent. Whether or not something contingently
you're violating the law again. You're just speaking nonsense, my friend. This is getting silly.
I don't know. I'm honestly confused because if there's a multiplicity of possibilities, then both possibilities are contingent, right?
Yes.
Right. So two possibilities means if one is true, it is contingently true.
If one is true, what from whose perception?
Reality. If there are two possible ways,
so reality is God. There's no contingent being, right? There's just the idea of something, right?
What?
You've got to have a perceiver in order to make some kind of assertion about reality. Rocks don't think about things.
Because then I could easily ask, what's making the assertions about the asserter? If it's themselves, then you're just doing circularity. If you say they're necessary, I'm also making statements.
You're just multiplying the problem without solving the problem. That doesn't do anything. It's kind of like
this is a different argument too. My original argument was just multiplicity of possibility means either possibility whether or not true or false is true or false contingently. True or false. Is that correct or not?
Can you repeat it again?
If there are two possible ways, if there are two possibilities, which one is true? If it is true, it is contingently true because there was another way it could have been. Or in other words, something cannot have two possible ways of being, let's say, and be one way and yet be necessarily that way. It being necessarily one of the ways would have meant that the other way was not possible to begin with.
But again, you've got to explain this storehouse that you have of possibilities. What is the nature of that? Is it multiplicity, or is it simple? Because if it's multiplicity, you got to tell me what is the nature.
You have the simple aspect, which is necessity itself, existence, and then the multiplicity comes from, again, what I think is the necessary contingent, or the necessary possibilities, which are all the, axiomatic combinations or truth statements that can be combined, which are consistent with that original simplistic statement.
Okay.
Or to put it in theistic terms, I would say God is simplistic, but possibility is all that is consistent with the nature of that simplistic God. Nothing could contradict God and be possible.
You made a statement and I forgot what it was. You said God is are you defining God as pure change?
No, so if I were to try and translate what I'm saying into a theistic sense, I would say God is a simplistic, necessary, fundamental thing all things depend on. A thing is possible by virtue of being consistent with God's simple nature. Would you agree to that?
God's simple nature, but it itself is a complexity of act and potency of being and what it is and its existence, essence and existence.
Yeah, it's the
so it's not simple
essence of
itself.
what
It can't be
exist.
simple itself, right? It can't be simple in its nature.
So do you believe God is made of components?
No, it can't be. Because
right,
everything that's composed requires a composer.
Right, so God is one component, correct? He is
he's one being, not a component, he's just being.
Yeah, he is the essence. And you would say he's simplistic. He's one concept, let's say, or an abstraction, or whatever you want to call it. He is one fundamental thing. Or foundation. He is a singular block, solid block of a foundation to reality. And then what I'm saying is all that is possible is that which is consistent with that singular block. Or in other words, to think of it now in architecture, it is all that could fit on the foundation. If something couldn't sit on the foundation by its nature, it wouldn't be possible. And it is possible by virtue of its compatibility with the foundation.
Yes, but it doesn't have its own separate ontology from the creator as a concept.
It's only possible by virtue of its fitting onto the foundation. And obviously something can't have an ontology without being possible.
Yes.
And it is only possible because it fits on the foundation. Therefore, yes, its ontology is dependent on the foundation, which is what I'm saying. When I say a contingent thing is only possible by virtue of the necessary, that is what I'm saying.
Well, saying it that way, I don't have a problem with that at all.
Yeah. And then what I'm saying is that that possibility or its compatibility is itself necessarily true. The fact that, yeah.
Yes, I have no problem with that. Again, we're getting back to nomic necessity or, decretive necessity. But
this is what I've been saying is its compatibility, or in other words, whether or not it is or is not on the foundation, it's possible is necessary. The possibility is necessary, but whether or not it's on the foundation or off the foundation, both of those being there or not being there is a contingent way for necessity to be instantiated.
Yes, but that necessity is not an effect. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's not an effect.
Okay.
Nor is the compatibility, or in other words, contingency itself. It is
Okay.
an aspect of the necessary.
So are you asserting then that you are not necessary in your being, you yourself?
I if what do you mean by that?
Do you depend on things to live?
Yes.
So you're contingent.
Yes, I am a contingent existence.
And so you're an effect.
I'm an effect, yes.
Okay. What caused you?
Well, there would be a stream of causes and,
Yeah, just
behind me.
extrapolate all the
And
way back.
eventually you get to the necessary, and then the question, this would switch topics somewhat, but then the question becomes, how do you transition from necessity to actualized contingency? Which I think is where you're going to this. Correct?
Well, they're not the same thing, right?
Well, yeah, the necessary and the contingent are not the same thing. But then you need an explanation for how you get contingent actualization. Because like I
Well,
said,
I don't need to know the process. I just need to know the logical necessity of the being.
well, of just necessity itself.
Yeah.
Like I said, I began this by telling you I believe in the necessary, I just don't perceive it as God.
Okay, what offense do you take by that word God?
I think it
Logically.
implies a lot of characteristics you can't give it. Like I said, I believe all existences contain the necessary, like they instantiate it and stuff. So I would say
So are you a pantheist?
now. All right, let me fix it up. What I mean is the necessary for it to be God, it would have to be just the necessary. Basically, God would have to be a definition which only includes the necessary, with
But
no
again,
contingent
you're
aspect.
defining contingency as being necessary being. You go back and forth over the thing, and it's convenient for you, but it's not logically consistent. You're violating law
But
of identity. Contingent being is not necessary
again,
being.
I'm not saying
Okay.
contingent being. I keep saying contingency itself, which is separate from
Contingency
contingent
is
being.
being.
The same way as
There's only being and not being. If you're talking about contingency, as if it's a thing, it has being.
well, no, because this is like saying morality, moral rules, and moral being and morality itself are different things. Like they are different things. The rule, the particular morality, is separate from morality itself, or virtue to a virtue. They are separate things. You have the thing and the thing itself.
Right. And there's a correlation though between
Yeah.
the two, right?
And there is similarly that with contingency. You have contingent things and then contingency itself. And every time I say contingency itself is necessary, you seem to reply, but contingent things aren't. But I'm not
Yes,
referring to
but the
contingent
contingency
things.
you're speaking to is basically God. The idea of contingency in God's mind. Is that what you're saying from my perspective?
I guess you could interpret it as God having knowledge of all the possible ways of
No,
existence.
I don't believe that. That's a
No?
like middle
Because that's
knowledge.
what I'm saying it is. It's
Because you have to
the
give
set of all
justification for the
possibilities.
story.
It's the
What?
compatibility.
Okay, tell me what store he has to go to come up with all these ideas. What's that look like?
Store what?
He does. God thinks in his mind, well, I could do this or I could do that. Again, it's complexity. Is you're
And
defining him as
it's all in like I said, you agree with this. It's all in reference to the necessary. It's what is compatible with the necessary. In the same way, the necessary knows, quote unquote, I'd say,
but is the
what is
necessary
and is not
contingent upon
possible
what he knows?
in this. Huh?
Is the necessary contingent upon these facts that he has and the counterfactuals in his mind?
No, it's an expression of the necessity. That's my point. Is in the same way you could say a square knows it doesn't have five sides. I'd say necessity knows all that's possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say
Okay.
that would be how I describe it. It's because it's nature. It's and like I said, contingency was defined, and you seem to agree, as that which is compatible with the necessary. The
Yes.
building pieces have to be compatible with the foundation.
Sure.
And the foundation inherently knows which pieces are compatible and which aren't because it knows itself. And things are
Yes.
compatible by virtue of whether or not they match the self or contradict or not the self, the necessity, the foundation.
Okay. And so I don't either you're some type of theist or deist or you're a pantheist. Tell me
No,
how I'm wrong in saying that.
because you keep hearing I believe in necessary and just interpreting that as God. but I'd say that's not God. And like I said, my explanation
Is there some being above necessary then?
no, because like I said, my original position I said was to atheism in the beginning was that because you asked me about my statement of agnostic atheist
Sure.
was that I'm gnostic atheist against the idea of a necessary God, but agnostic to more abstract versions that'll you could say lower down on the totem pole in terms of ontology. And so that's what I'm saying here is I do not view the necessary as God because I view a necessary God as having to be purely necessary, but I do not believe there is such thing as the purely necessary.
All right, then your necessary, it's an admixture of something else?
That it's the possibility of other contingent states. Basically,
So
what
again,
I'm
you're
saying is
violating the law of
every
identity.
existent thing.
Have you ever heard anybody teach it? Have you ever learned this from anybody?
Yeah, honestly, I'm a lot self-taught.
That's what I thought. Whenever you have an idea that nobody's ever heard of, you might want to be a little bit
I know
careful.
other people have
You're
heard
violating laws of thought here all over the place.
I'm not sure which one because I'm.
You may think you're clever, but it's just not. That doesn't make any sense. Well,
Let me do this.
You're moving
What
from
I'm saying
pantheism
is,
to.
I believe all existences have to have a possibility of having a contingent aspect.
But you end up conflating contingency and necessary being as kind of parts of the same thing. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, again, you could say, let me ask you this question. Do you believe that God's mind contains knowledge of all that is possible?
No, but again,
No.
because because God's mind is not.
So,
Again, you have to come up with a store that God has to go shopping at. What it is, I think it's an incommunicable attribute. It's something we can't understand.
So, would you say then God's mind lacks knowledge of a certain possibility?
No, he doesn't deliberate.
Or do you say then he doesn't have again, what do you even mean by mind then at that point? Because like I said, my example was a square knows it has four sides in the same way
but a square
the
is not
necessary
sentient.
knows. Huh?
A square is not sentient.
Yeah, but now you're also saying, but it's not going anywhere in its own mind to recollect a thing, which sounds a lot like it knows via identity, not recollection.
And your God is your ultimate reality is not sentient, right?
No, it's not sentient.
All right, how does he
It has
give
no
us
mind.
that
It
property?
only has identity. It only knows, like I said, in the same way a square knows it has four sides, in the sense of it's just the way it is.
Okay, how do we get a property that God does not have?
Way.
How do we get a property that the necessary does not have?
That the necessary doesn't have? Well, I'd say you begin by asking what is compatible. Again, all the potential truths of combinations.
It can't do what we're doing. It doesn't have that capacity.
I don't understand what's the issue with me saying, possibility comes from necessity, and then you simply go into the possible, which is within the necessary.
But you're saying it's impossible for necessary being to be like we are, to be intentional.
Necessity can't be intention.
Why?
Or intentional, I'd say intentional requires a mind, and that the necessary does not have a mind.
Right. Why? Is that just because it's convenient? Because,
again, the two ways I could see you interpreting mind in this instance is either based on identity, which just goes down. Huh? Again, you keep saying mind, but then I say, oh, does he know? And you say, well, it's not a place he goes, it's identity. But then I say, oh, so like this identity, and you say no. So can you please clarify for me what you mean by God's having a mind or sentience or whatever?
He has intention. He has goals to do certain things.
And how does one have goal without deliberation?
I'm sorry?
How does one have goal without deliberation?
Deliberation is yes, by addition, right? By complexity. Complexity is something that's necessary to contingency. God doesn't think like we do.
Yeah, so I'm asking you to explain what do you mean by the way God thinks? Because every time I try and pin it down, you say no. So I clearly don't understand it.
He cannot think through addition where he learns things.
Yeah.
That's how we think. We take subject plus predicate.
Yes. So he must inherently have all the knowledge just in himself. He doesn't gain it. He has it.
Within himself.
He is it.
There's no store that he has to go to get knowledge of all the counterfactuals or how everything can be.
Which is when I use the identity example. a square does not have to go somewhere to know it has 4 sides. Again, you'd
But a
say it doesn't
square is
have a
not
mind.
sentient.
Yeah, because again, though, then the question becomes, what is the qualification for sentience here? Because clearly, in this sense,
it's going to be telos. It's going to be that it has the ability to um, um, I don't desire is kind of a weak word, but to move toward a certain goal. Like
and what qualifies
we're
as
moving
moving
toward the
towards a
goal
certain
of
goal?
enlightenment right
Because
here,
there are
right now.
fundamental goals that are fundamental to an identity. Certain identities fundamentally move towards a certain state, just by virtue of it being an expression of its state.
Like what?
Well, an obvious example would be combinations of identities have this property. Like if I said there is a box and it is 10 by 10, and then I put 2 squares in and I say they will exist in random places. Well, most likely you're going to end up with an entropic state where they don't clump up together. And that's entropy. There are more possible states where they are separate than where they are clumped. And thus, simply by their very nature of their confinement, they will spread out.
Okay, but to take material properties like that is not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about your desire to live.
Yeah.
The idea that existence is better than non-existence. You agree with that?
Yes.
Okay, so that's teleological, right? Toward existence.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, how does that instantiate unintentionally?
Instantiate unintentionally? What do you mean?
How does whatever you're saying the ultimate reality is give us the desire to value existence when it does not desire?
Well, then so we're getting more into morality now, I'd say, almost, of purpose, of direction. And I'd say
my whole thing has been intentionality. Morality is based upon intentionality, that the existence is somehow special. Every moral law is going to be to sanctify existence.
Well, I disagree with that too, because I'd also say that although existence is great, the right things need to exist. Bad things can also exist, and they shouldn't exist.
Yes, bad things are what destroy existence.
You could say that.
Mm-hmm.
But I
That's
also
why every
think
moral law is the purpose is to sanctify. Adolf Hitler was seeking to sanctify existence. He was wrong. He thought he was saving the world, but he was wrong in that. But he still was trying to save existence.
Saying all evil is simply the destruction of some existence, I feel
it is a negation of the good.
Yeah, a negation of the good. But that to me,
and the good is
you almost
existence.
have to arbitrarily define the axis, because it's like, is suffering a removal of happiness, or is happiness the removal of suffering? Or are they just two sides with a neutral zone between the two that are different? Just as an example. Because we generally say suffering is bad, that, torture is bad. But then would you say the suffering is the destruction of happiness?
What was the last thing you said?
Is suffering the destruction of happiness?
Suffering, the destruction of happiness. That's a great question. Suffering, because we all acknowledge that suffering can bring a good. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it can bring a good.
That's why I think God ordains evil. He doesn't create evil.
But suffering can also be bad.
Yes.
Yeah, so suffering can be bad.
Because it destroys existence.
Unnecessary suffering, let's say. Just suffering for the sake of suffering.
Yeah, because it destroys existence.
Yeah, but what?
And when I say existence, I don't mean just living. I mean happiness. I mean fullness of life, of joy.
But then my point was just, it seems you are arbitrarily choosing an axis here, because I could just as easily say that happiness is the destruction of suffering, and say that.
Yes, but you're just playing a word game. I mean,
yeah, but I would argue you are doing the same. I'm not actually taking this position. My point is, whether or not you view happiness as destroying suffering or suffering destroying happiness is arbitrary. There isn't really a correct axiom in that sense.
Then what are you describing? Then you're just saying that
I'd say they are mutually exclusive, separate things.
But there is truth, right?
Hmm?
There is truth, right?
Yeah, there is truth. And the two truths of being happy and being suffering is mutually exclusive. They are contradictory.
Contradiction is bad, right?
Contradiction means it doesn't exist.
Well, contradiction just is a bad thing because it doesn't It doesn't
Well,
make sense. You're
it's
violating
not
logic.
bad. It's that it just doesn't exist. It's not a cohesive thing. You can't even identify it.
So you seek contradiction in your life?
No, like I said, I just said it doesn't exist. Why would I seek that which doesn't exist? How
Then
do
what are you
you even
referring to?
seek that which
If
can't
contradiction
be?
doesn't exist, then why do you speak of the word as if it's something?
Because it is a reference to the whole. It's in reference to that which does exist. If you have that which exists, you have that which is non-existent.
Right. So
If you have that which is
it's
possible, you
just
have
a
that which is
privation of the good.
impossible. And so we assign these names. Even if contradiction means, this isn't a thing, I can still say that isn't a thing in reference to the contradictory mess. Because the thing is, nothing in actual reality is a true contradiction that you encounter. You can give an abstraction of the idea, but you can't actually have the thing itself. Because otherwise that would imply there's a contradiction in reality, which
There's
is
no such thing
impossible.
as contradiction.
In reality, in existence. We can gesture at it with non-contradictory things. Like me saying that is contradictory is not a contradictory statement in and of itself. But it can refer to something you said that itself, again, points to a contradiction. A
Okay.
absence. It points to an absence, a hole.
Yes. Well, yeah, I think I agree with that. But listen, accounted for, I need to get going. I usually
Okay.
keep these to about an hour. It's been a very stimulating conversation.
Yeah.
I've not talked to somebody like you. And usually most people that I talk to are mostly atheists. They're just super materialistic. I can tell you don't have any formal educational philosophy, but you are very thoughtful and have some very interesting ideas. I don't think your ideas work, but I also think you're quite intelligent and very challenging to listen to. And I really enjoyed this conversation. And maybe we can have one again sometime in the future.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this conversation too.
Okay, man. All right. All the best to you.
All right.
All right. We'll see you later.
See you later. Bye.
All right. Bye.